For Braddon. Question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Barton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to support the motion moved by the member for Grayndler. It recognises that 13 years ago, the then Prime Minister Kevin Rudd made a very long-awaited national apology to the stolen generations on behalf of the nation. It was one of the first items of business of the newly elected Labor government. The landmark inquiry into the stolen generations, the Bringing Them Home report, had been launched a decade before. For 11 long years, those taken, and in fact the whole nation, waited for the words, "We are sorry." The Bringing Them Home report had 54 recommendations. This included that Australian governments acknowledge and apologise for the policies of forced removal, as well as the Indigenous child placement principle, that notion that when an Indigenous child must be removed, that they be placed with a family member, a member of the child's community, or another Indigenous carer. But it's not just the recommendations that are important about this report. It drew a line in the sand for us as a nation. No one could ever say again, "We didn't know." It represented an important act of truth-telling. There were many thousands of people who survived and were able to tell their stories for those of us that remained. Of course, the Archie Roach song "Took the Children Away," which says we'll give them what they can't give, teach them how to really live, teach them how to live, and they said, humiliated them instead, taught them that and taught them this, and others taught them prejudice. They took the children away. This motion also emphasises the importance of closing the gap and a commitment to, in fact, bringing about justice and equity for First Peoples in Australia. Good words are only truly meaningful when they are accompanied with sincere deeds and lasting progress. This is the first year since the apology that we will not get a report from the Prime Minister on progress or lack of progress on the targets. What concerns me is, after a decade, progress against the 7 targets in 2020 was dismal reading, as the member for Grayndler outlined. At the conclusion of those 7 targets, only 2 are on track: child mortality, reading, writing and numeracy, school attendance, employment outcomes and life expectancy, all not on track. These aren't just statistics, they are lives. I'm sick of going to funerals of people who have died too young. The national agreement on closing the gap is indeed welcome. It is welcome especially because of the partnership with the Coalition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Peak organisations. This is a good thing. There are 16 new targets, with 2 still being negotiated. States and territories will have to report, as well as the Commonwealth. Labor, in principle, endorsed the new targets, in particular the target about the overrepresentation of First Australians in the child protection system, as well as the criminal justice system. 2 targets Labor had been advocating for many years. The time frame for these targets is another 10 years. This means at the expiration of the new targets, over 2 decades will have passed since closing the gap first began. 23 years, a whole generation. I say to this Parliament that that is a very long time. So it is important we get this right this time. We must not allow this decade-long time frame to become the impetus for kicking the burden of progress to future parliaments. If we want to see the real and lasting progress on closing the gap, we need new investment. The Commonwealth government must fully embrace its share of the new Closing the Gap agreement, not simply to wash its hands of responsibility to the states and territories. The First Nations people need to be placed at the centre of decision-making on issues affecting First Nations people. We are best placed to find the solutions on issues that affect us. Labor remains committed to the Uluru Statement in full. This includes a constitutionally enshrined voice to the Parliament, a voice that reflects the diversity of challenges that we have faced across the nation, a voice that listens to our regions and remote communities, as well as our urban areas. It's been 3.5 years since the Uluru Statement. It's time to get on with it and get it done.
Yeah.